Welcome to So Guided, a spiritual travel guide for the curious. Join Carissa and Jenny, ordinary people exploring all the extraordinary ways we can connect to the universe. Each week, they investigate another spiritual modality and adventure through all the wild ways we can find high vibes, hope, and ultimately, enlightenment.
Hello and welcome to another episode of So Guided. Today we are diving into reincarnation. We're covering all the bases. What is it? What do we think of it? Examples that you might have hints coming through of past lives. And last, we prep Carissa for before as she's about to go get a past life regression. You've got questions, so do we. Let's do this.
Happy full moon night.
I mean, we're recording on an actual full moon. That has to mean something, right?
Yes.
We are so excited today because this is one of my favorite subjects we're about to get into. Is this one of your favorite subjects, or did I make you like this subject?
You got me into it. You got me
Okay.
way more into it.
Okay. So we are talking about reincarnation today. And this is probably the woo-woo of my life, is the thing that I've been the most interested in from when I was born. From when I was the littlest I could ever remember, I just believed this to be true.
That's so cool.
So anyway, we're going to dig into reincarnation, but like every episode, we need to start with a woo-woo story. So what has happened to you this week that you'd like to share? It could be light, it could be heavy. Tell us.
Oh, it's so... It's one of the things that brought the biggest smile to my face. And I think we have talked about a little bit before how, kids in your life can bring you such signs. Mm-hmm. And so how they're just automatically so much more connected. And the other day, I have a 3-year-old Van. We went out, we got up early, as it's always early, and the sun was coming up. And it was one of the most beautiful sunrises. It's winter here. It's beautiful, but it was one of those like breathtaking sunrises. And so I'm like, oh my God, we have to go out on the front deck. And since
what time was it?
It was probably, 6:45 in the morning. And since my dog passed away, we don't go out that front that often. Normally, your dog's making a noise about my dog. I miss you, Capri. So we're not outside as much as we used to. We used to always take the dog out, obviously. And so we hadn't gone outside in a very, very long time in the morning just to go outside. So we go outside, let's go look at the sunrise. And Van looks up at the sunrise and he's immediately like, "Hi, Florence. Hi, Ruby." Waves up into the sky. "Hi, Pepe. Hi, Capri. Hi, Grandma Atkins." Literally everyone in my life that is like passed on that I'm like close to, out of nowhere, uninhibited.
Did you have full body chills?
Oh my God, it was unbelievable. I'm like, this is the stuff, you can't even make this up. Like this little 3-year-old just out of nowhere just starts waving at the beautiful sky saying hello to everybody. And I was just like, well, if that doesn't remind you that there's so much more to life.
You know what? Thinking this story is amazing, and it reminds me, why are we not asking more questions of Van?
I know, it's so funny.
He's in the sweet spot.
He is in the sweet spot.
Where he's like,
he is.
I love that. We are so much more in tune when we're little. No one's told us otherwise. He saw them in the beauty.
It's so beautiful. And you know what, when I had gone to one of those like psychics, they even said like around 5, they said like, oh, your baby like is so connected.
Yes.
He's like talking. He's like, he sees people, they play like all like constantly. She's like, she's like, kids get more in their head. And when they're like 5, you start losing it. And I'm like, I'm trying so hard to keep it so he keeps it. But it's so beautiful. And it's like, it was such a good woo-woo. So
that's
light
amazing.
and happy, and just a reminder for everybody that your spirits are with you.
Oh my gosh. From the mouth of babes, they say. And that's so true.
So true.
All right. Well, my weekly woo-woo is kind of light too, but I think that's important. It doesn't always need to be this crazy thing. But we're doing a manifestation challenge.
Yep.
And so every morning I'm journaling, which I'm not usually good at, and I could already feel a response in myself that like I was meant to write. The psychic reading told me to write, and I already feel very connected now when I'm writing, even though I used to fight back and I didn't want to do it. So I was sitting here and I was writing, and it's winter. My favorite spirit animal and sign, the egrets, have all migrated south, so they're no longer outside my window anymore. But wouldn't you know it, I'm writing, and I wrote a particularly profound statement, and at the exact moment I did, an egret swooped past my window in a spot where I wouldn't see it because I wasn't looking outside, but enough for me to notice, and flew on.
Oh my
God. And I just felt like, wow, in this little light moment, my action in the right direction to write as a part to connect with myself or spirit, and I immediately had a sign.
Oh my God.
And it was enough that I actually looked up the migration of egrets afterwards in Massachusetts to figure out, like, are they supposed to be here? And it says they go south. They do go south.
Unbelievable.
So
is your profound statement something that is shareable?
Well, I've been writing about like what I want in the world, and it was actually, funny enough, our podcast. So when I went into this manifestation challenge, which is a whole nother episode that we will get into, I really thought I was going towards my Paris apartment, and I've started to realize that it's meant a little bit more for me to think about where this would go and that we actually create it in the world. So if we're honest, where we're recording right now, we haven't done anything. We're two friends who are recording multiple episodes, just us in one of our houses or one of our offices, right?
Yep.
And it's time for us to take action. And in my journal, I actually wrote that it's time for us to find our people who feel how we feel.
Oh, I love that.
And that was when the egret flew. And that was when I was done writing, I went and started looking up how to find sound editors, which is our next step. And so by the time you're listening to this, all these things have happened. And my egret flew by to tell me to do it.
I love that.
Okay.
I love it. All right, now let's talk about past lives and regression. One of your favorite topics, and something I didn't realize was something you felt since you were little.
Yes. So reincarnation is an interesting subject, and I want to first say that when we talk about it, we like to relate it to having no religious implications. Right. So I think that's true of all of our subjects, is we're not digging into what it would mean to anyone. But I will say this, that in every single one, there's some allusion to it in scriptures, and every religion, there's some nod to it. And that's all I'll say about that. For me, reincarnation is a knowing that I had. But just so, what is reincarnation? Just boring, looked it up, here's the definition I found. Reincarnation is the belief that a person's soul can be reborn into another body after they die. It originates from Eastern religions like Hinduism and Buddhism, but has become more widely accepted by those who are spiritually enlightened in Western society.
Okay, I love it.
So just very basically, so I don't know. I will tell you my thoughts on it, but I'm curious because I think a cool perspective is yours, which this is newer to you. What do you feel? Like, how are you feeling the definition of reincarnation is? And on the scale of believing, is this one of your knowings, or are you growing to knowing? So tell me more.
So it's a knowing now, but it was a grow to know.
Yes, a grow to know.
So it's funny. My mom, who's very Christian, she's not Catholic, but she's basically like Bible, very into that. Like, she, even when I was little, has said like, oh, she believes in past lives. Right. She always has. But we never got like deep into it. She just mentioned it in passing. But I had never thought of that as like something I automatically related to, even when she had mentioned it. But on our spiritual kind of exploration, it's something that has, come up more and more. And when I start thinking about like, what do I know? What do I believe in? It just seems to make sense where like, I don't think this would be it. And I think we live in order to learn. And I feel like we take those lessons and then would go into another lesson, like when we so choose. Right. So I feel like it's definitely something that I 100% believe in now. And I think that like I really can see how it would work in like in a lot of different ways. Like I think people may believe in it in different ways, but I just think of it as something that like you learn, like you're on earth in a certain body and like your soul is still your soul. And, when you learn, and I don't think it's like your next like life is a punishment. I think it's more of like, or a reward necessarily. I think it's all just to like continue learning for whatever it is we are in this universe.
I love the learning because when there's times where it doesn't make sense why something's happening to us, that does make sense. Like if there's this all-knowing, loving energy around us, why do we have to hurt? Why is there pain? And it makes sense of that, if you will. Like the reason that I'm experiencing this is for me to learn how to grow or dig into myself or find this other thing. But something else about it is just energy itself energy doesn't go away. So like the energy that's inside of us, it goes somewhere. So when our body shuts down, that energy that exists within us, it has to flow to something. And so for me, like just from a basic energy level, not even emotional, nothing else, the energy doesn't just exist and then the energy just goes away.
Totally agree. Yes.
Energy has to continue. So what is that energy? And not to be morbid, but one of the days that I'll never forget really feeling souls and that there has to be something is the day my grandma passed. I don't know if I ever told you that I was physically in the room with her in her final days, and all of our family was. And she was in hospice in her care center. And we were with her, and her energy was there, even though she wasn't speaking to us. And I think it was a couple hours that I was gone, and I came back, and she had passed. And the energy in the room was so different. And sitting there looking at her form, her body was in front of me, right where she was snuggling in her blankets 2 hours before. And the same exact thing I was looking at was energy different. And I thought to myself at the moment, for the lack of a better term, the shell, our skin, I thought, oh, she's gone somewhere. It was just this like weird knowing of like, there was an energy there and now it's not. And it was just so clear to me.
I have goosebumps. Yeah.
It was so clear to me that energy doesn't just nothing. I have to believe it. And I felt like I witnessed it in those few hours more than I ever have in my life.
Yeah. Well, and I still have a belief of a like quote unquote heaven.
Yes.
I still think like when your grandma passes, like, and for anyone, I still feel like they go to a heaven or a spot and like kind of reset. And like I don't think you go right into a new body. I think you go somewhere until you decide you're ready. And I feel like one of the things I've liked and I've also latched onto with the reincarnation is that you're making choices before you come back into the next body. You're figuring out who your parents are going to be. Like I think as like prior to your life, in each life, you figure out what situation is going to give you the most like growth as a soul. And so I think that like that's all part of it too. So when you're up there, like you're kind of figuring, oh, this is my parents, like, and you may even like some of the good and some of the bad or some of the pivotal moments in your life you may be aware of before you commit to that body. And I've read a lot of like people kind of sharing those experiences of like they chose that, like, you know, they knew that this was going to be their parents. They knew they were going to have an illness in their 20s and like that was going to spark something. And like they've, you know, said that there's like this like infinite an amount of possibilities based on choice, but like there are some key moments that are going to impact.
That were orchestrated.
Yeah, they're orchestrated
the lesson you're supposed to
for
learn.
the lesson.
Yeah.
So, and I like I said, I really, when you ask me like, what do I feel about it? I feel like that's a large part of it. And I'm big into that.
I love that. I will tell you something kind of funny, and I'm sure everyone falls on the scale differently, but the first drawing of the subject to me was more a romantic movie version.
Yeah.
Like the idea of, oh, was I an Egyptian princess or a movie star in the 1920s, 30s? Right. There's this romantic thing of past lives, and I think that was like the fun part. And so for most of my life, that was the exciting part.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense.
The part you're talking about is really like new to us as we've explored these subjects.
Oh, yeah.
And it really fine-tunes the thought of reincarnation now. So what I mean is like, I thought it was just this romantic, fun, like idea.
That makes sense. Well,
if you will. Yeah. And now the idea. So what you're talking about is we listened to multiple podcasts on the subject. We've read books on it, as we do, investigating. So our new learnings have been that they say there's this time in between lives that's restorative, heaven-like. You are with other souls that love you and your pack of people. And they say Earth is what they call it?
School.
School.
So it's a school. Yeah, it's a school.
It's Earth school, right?
Yeah, and it's a hard school.
Right, and it's hard. So we've learned all these funny things, whether you could believe it or not.
Exactly, believe it or not.
I've actually chosen to believe it. And I kind of love living life like that because you and I guess we can even say we've leaned into right before we hit record on the microphone. We're talking about a couple of life lessons we experienced this week, and it helps us to shift it to instead of this happening to me and I'm a victim of life, we thought, okay, how can I learn from this? Because this is for a reason. And it helps kind of put a new perspective on things when you think, okay, I'm here to learn. I'm not a victim of this life.
Love that.
It puts a lighter version on it, right?
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, who knows anything? But when we put it like that, it does resonate so well with us. And I think that's, that's what's so cool about and why we're doing so much more exploring into it.
Right. All right. So I do want to share a specific story that I've heard forever, and I think it's really cool. But reincarnation is one of those things that, how do you prove it? And for the most part, it's having to believe people's stories.
Right.
People who've gone through past life regression, people who have had memories they're expressing. There's a million ways people remember it, but it's memory and it's words and it's storytelling. But what's really cool there are some stories that people have been able to pull out historical facts and prove correct. I think you and I are always looking for evidence. Give me evidence. So I love that. So there's a really cool story about a little boy named James Leininger. And if you're curious on the subject and you want more evidence, Google the F out of this story because it's all over the place. But just really, really to tell you about it on a light level, there's this little boy was 2, and he started talking about World War II to his parents in language that didn't make sense for a 2-year-old to talk to. And it started with nightmares about dying in an airplane. And the little boy would wake up in a fright and talking about it with his parents. And they started to realize this theme of he was very specifically talking about World War II in his little toddler speak. And one of the early things that had happened was his mom was playing with him with the toy plane and referred to the bottom of the plane as the bottom of the plane. And he said, "No, Mom, that's called a drop tank." And this kid is too.
Yeah.
So they had a million things like that. They were watching a news program and they called a Japanese plane a zero. And he said, "That's not what we called it. We called it a Tony." Yeah. And both of these things were proven to be looked into. Yeah. Another very specific thing is he told them an actual ship that he lived on was an Atoma. Wow. And his parents didn't know anything about this, looked it up, and there was a ship called an Atoma. And he told them he flew a Corsair. And he even told them that they got flat tires all the time. I mean, the specifics of what this little boy was talking about was crazy. So he was so obsessed with this that he loved toy planes. He was drawn to all these things. But he had so many little knowledge bombs that his parents were able to look up. But one of the things that he was able to say specifically were people's names. He knew first names of many people and he'd say what color hair they had.
Wow.
So his father ended up getting into, they wrote a book about it, and he started to investigate and reaching out to these war veterans who actually knew the boys' last incarnation, and he was able to say their names. He found the people, and he'd say blah 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 with the red hair, and then when he looked up the many interviews later, he found the guy with the red hair with that.
Did the little boy know who he was?
Yes.
They were able to figure out what his name was?
He knew his name. So ironically, in this life, he was James, and he told his parents he was another James. And it turned out, he knew he was a pilot. He knew he died in Iwo Jima, was shot down in Iwo Jima. And they actually found records of a man named James Hurston who was shot down as a pilot. So just so many specific things. And this story is so fascinating because often what we're going to talk about and a lot of what you and I are going to dig into when we talk about reincarnation, we're never going to be able to prove it.
Right.
Maybe never. Let me not say never. Maybe we'll find a fact.
Right.
But for the most part, but how cool is this? They just went through and they were able to find all these things. And I think that's so neat just to see, for the evidence-based people to hear this story. And there's others like that. There's a little boy who was born in the Midwest somewhere who just told his mom his living conditions just didn't meet his standards and that he had a much more luxurious life last time and was really drawn to old Hollywood. And I guess whatever, he had little knowledge bombs when he was a toddler, enough that the mom went and got books. And there was a picture of an obscure movie and he's like, "Hey, that's me." And then he went into details about that day and things that they were able to prove right. And really funny, but he didn't think his life was glamorous enough this time around.
So funny.
And,
oh my God.
But so there's so many cool, and a lot of them are children's stories, but we're going to actually...
Which makes sense, because the kids are able to connect still. And
even it's so awesome you talked about your baby van this morning, as we were just saying, and they do say that children listen to them. Around 5 is when these memories and thoughts start to fade away.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
But those are cool stories, but to get to grown-ups who are curious, like, are you curious, like, you visited a place in Switzerland and you were drawn to it and you've been curious about reincarnation, but we as grown-ups are like, all right, how do we trigger our memories?
Right.
And you and I, in our pursuit of knowledge, are both like, all right, we want to know more.
Yeah.
So anyway, just to give you some examples of how someone might have hits of past life remembrance.
So how you might know that for you.
So there's a list. I have 9 of them.
Okay.
And so I'm asking you guys listening, like, have you had these?
Okay.
Like, and think about them a minute. Like, take a minute and think, oh my gosh, I have had that. And let that marinate. And if you're curious, like, maybe journal about it and or just let yourself drift if you're driving in the car. Like, think about this. But anyway, examples that you've had hits of past lives.
Okay.
1, frequent deja vu.
Okay.
Deja vu is fun. It's a curious subject on its own. But this could be a remembering of a moment or something that was similar that you had experienced in the past.
Okay.
If you've had many of them, they say that, like, that's actually a trigger or a signal, like, that you're on to
many around the same, like, have you had that?
Same
like,
deja
around
vu.
the same? Okay,
Right.
okay.
So, deja vu always makes me think that, like, right?
Yeah.
You're like, whoa, I've been here before.
I've been here before. Yeah.
right? And what I don't know the answer to, that my question is, does it mean that I was in this town in Massachusetts before? Or, like, was it a similar moment occurred before?
Right.
I don't know.
Right, or was it a glitch in the Matrix?
Like,
yeah, what is
right.
it?
Is
Yeah,
it a glitch in the Matrix?
Yeah.
Exactly. So deja vu is one of them. Unfamiliar memories that are out of place and persistent. So this is an interesting one I haven't experienced, but I can kind of guess what it would be. That might be like the little boy talking about airplanes and having a knowledge base.
He would never have
he
that
wouldn't
knowledge.
know, and persistent memories of being in a cockpit. Like, one of the stories the mom told was that, like, when he was a little boy, he went through the motions of, like, buckling in and getting ready as he went through the motions and clicking up above.
And we can talk about this more, is like the imagination portion of it. Sometimes you think you're just making things up. And I feel like as an adult, if I was thinking about something, like if I was thinking about Egypt a lot, I wouldn't necessarily be like, oh, it's because of the past life.
Right.
I'd just be like, oh, I must have saw a show.
Right.
Or I'm just like, like, or it just popped in my head. Like maybe someone said something. I don't know if I would, even hearing you say that, I don't know if I would be able to connect that to a past life.
No, but it's a subtle connection.
Yeah.
But that's perfect, because the next one on the list is a strong identification with another culture and or an urge to travel there. So let's talk about Egypt. That's a big one. I would argue on the other side of the spectrum, that's like a sexy, mysterious culture that who isn't a little bit curious about. So that one is kind of universally exciting, I think. But the house we rented, the gentleman, every book in his house was from Japan.
Oh,
and
cool.
he had art on the walls and everything in his rental home. It was furnished with his things. And I thought, oh, wow.
He's got a calling about, he
has a past life there, but billions of books and art on the walls. And I think this is an interesting and true one. I think people are drawn to an area, and it could just be the exoticism of a different culture.
Right.
Or it could be, and that's what the list is saying, you were drawn to it because you live there. And I think that's kind of fun. In a similar vein, an affinity for languages.
Oh.
I love that one. I've always been into France. Since I was a little girl, I've been a Francophile before I can understand it. And side note, as you know, my son was born this way. Since he was a little boy, we had visited France. He had asked me to bring books home, and that was his favorite book to read every night.
Yeah.
But you get drawn to languages.
Yeah.
And then I will, as you know, I have a France story that I'll tell after I go through this list, but that's my calling, and that's my culture that I was drawn to, and there must be a story there somewhere along the way. This is an interesting one, and I kind of will take the next note on it, is feeling older than you are. And I'm going to sub in the word wiser than the age you are.
Okay.
And to me, this kind of goes with old and new souls.
Yes.
I think everyone, no matter who you are, people use this as an everyday term.
Everyday term.
Oh, he's an old soul, or she's a new soul.
Right.
And I think that, like, somewhere inside of us, there's a knowing that there are new and old souls.
Yes.
That's common.
Commonplace.
But how often, like, you don't even need to, like, go deep into reincarnation and believe everything we're talking about. Have you not met someone and you're like, wow, they're, like, wise beyond their years?
And not even that, you can go even further back. Have you not looked at certain newborn babies who have a look on their face and they've been here before?
You've been here before.
I mean, and I'm saying, like, I've seen kids in grocery stores. So I can be like,
wow.
oh my God, that looks like an old soul. You know, like they have a look on their face. Like and I don't think that's because I'm spiritual. I think that's more common than we even like think about. That's really.
That might be the biggest one on the list.
Yeah, I like that one.
I feel like that it's an energy. It's a knowing that I would press that every person in this world, if we really pressed, could say they had an experience where they had the reaction that someone was new or old soul.
Yeah, I agree.
So I think that one's a really big one.
Right.
To push forward our reincarnation agenda.
Yeah.
Okay. This is a big one. Irrational fears or phobias.
Yes. I was going to,
Okay. So this is a big one that's going to get into regression and past life regression. That this comes a lot up when people go into these sessions. But people have a crazy fear of drowning that they cannot explain, a fear of water that doesn't make sense in their adulthood, the fear of a fire, the fear of small spaces. There's a million things, but reincarnation believers would say that this was a trauma that happened in another life that you haven't moved on from.
Yeah, well, and that's actually where my mom's comes into place, because my mom, again, who's like very religious but believes in past lives, has told me, I'm like, why do you, when I've asked, like when I have inquired, that she has an irrational fear of being attacked. And when she told me this, because I had asked more recently as I've been getting into, I'm like, Mom, I know you've mentioned you think you had past lives. Like, why do you think that? What do you think you were? And she's like, I think I was some sort of like Native American, and I think I got attacked by another tribe.
Okay.
She legit says that. Like, and she says that even when we were growing up, which I didn't know this, we lived in like a very rural, like very small house, kind of in the woods, like in a small like town. And she says like she would check the woods all the time, even growing up, which I didn't know she was doing. Like she was always afraid like something was like hiding in the woods at her.
Wow.
And I'm like, oh my God, Mom, like I always kind of thought it was cool she believed into it, and then I realized like it's more of a trauma, you know,
and
where
it's so specific.
It's very specific, right? And so that is definitely something where she, again, even as obviously she's a believer, but I wouldn't call her somebody, and you know my mom, you would not look at her and think she'd be a believer in this at all.
I really need to clarify that. She is like your mom, like if I came over, she's gonna like cook me dinner and take care of me and warm fuzzy.
Right.
And
then like read, and then
like
make sure you say your prayers.
Exactly.
Like read the Bible. You know what I'm saying?
So
she's got a very like religious, like very specific, like
so this makes me
God-fearing.
This like makes me like your story more.
Yeah. Well, that's what I'm saying.
My favorite stories are the people that aren't as open as you.
Right. Yeah.
We're actually less exciting because we're open.
Yeah. Exactly.
The ones that are, but that's so specific,
and
I love
specific.
it.
Isn't that interesting?
Wow. We need to ask your mom to get into this more.
All right, we will. We can. Let's have her.
Okay. We're making her do a past life regression.
Oh my God. See, that's where I don't know if I don't think she would do it. But
what if we could heal her? All right.
Okay.
So that one actually would go into the next one, which is inexplicable body pains. And that's people who have an injury, like a chronic problem in their lives. And in regression, where people were taken into regression by past life therapists, a lot of people end up coming out having relived a life where they were stabbed in their side, and then they wake up from the regression and that pain that they felt their whole life is gone, or an arthritis in a certain area, and they found out that was because something happened. But body pains or maladies in yourself that are persistent is another sign of it.
Okay.
All right. Identifying a reoccurring dream in your life. So if you have a repeat dream that pops up, this could be similar to your mom. She might actually, if we asked her, not only have that feeling that she tells you, but she might have dreams related to it that keep coming up.
Yep.
But I think that makes sense.
Yeah,
If it's coming in your sleep when you're at most peace, that makes sense. And then my favorite one is knowing someone you just met. When you just know someone. It could be someone that like is on a bus and you talk for 5 minutes and there's a familiarity beyond anything you can explain. Or it's a new friend you meet at the ballet studio.
Yeah, no, I totally think that about you.
Right,
I think about that as
we
your
talk
example.
about that all the time is how we met, but there's always people. It's your husband. There's a knowing when you meet the person that you end up marrying. I think most people feel it.
Yes.
It's friends, it's loved ones, it's a baby being born.
Yeah, it's your kids. But
I feel like that one's a real good one.
I love that one.
So if you think about this list, and I'll put it in the show notes to hopefully maybe trigger something if someone's looking into kind of thinking like, do I have any inclination towards something? That kind of leans into what we're going to do for you. So this is actually an intro to reincarnation, because I think there's so much more to talk about here, and I love this subject so much. So this is really a light intro and a before episode.
Yay, a before.
Because Carissa on Monday is going to do a past life regression.
Yes.
Now, do you guys know what that is? I've referred to it a million times in this episode, and I'm sorry I haven't told you sooner if you don't know what that is. But I'm going to actually let you explain because we did a pre-call with the therapist that's going to do it. So tell us what past life regression is. What is it? And what is the act of it?
So basically, in my situation, what I'm going to do is work with like a past life regression like therapist, I guess it's called a therapist, who is basically puts you into hypnosis and then walks you kind of through a certain formula or whatever he does, and then allows you to access your past life. And so we've been super into this. And there's a lot of people that do this, and I had actually randomly this podcast kind of fell in my lap, and I was really drawn to this certain person. He happens to be in London and he offers past life regressions. And so I was like, if I'm going to try this, he'd be the one. And it was really cool. So we did do, like Jenny mentioned, a pre-call, and got to ask him a bunch of questions just so we're prepared for the session. And essentially what he said was he is certified in hypnotherapy. And basically that doesn't mean that you have no idea what's going on. You actually know exactly what's going on. So you're able to be in a very relaxed state and access your subconscious, but still feel very aware. And what he said, one of the things which kind of stuck out with me, is a lot of people, while they're in it, are so aware that they feel like it's not working, or they feel like it's not happening, but the messages come through almost as your imagination. So whether you get that as a picture in your head, or whether you get it as as just a knowing, or as if you hear something, it basically said you have to the only way that your kind of your spirits, your guides, your higher conscious can communicate with you is through your mind and your imagination.
That's right.
So just to kind of trust that. And he said that what he'll do is he'll call in our guides and our higher selves to kind of help with the process, and if they have anything. And he does it kind of two ways. He does hey, if you have a very like you said, if you have a severe pain or a severe fear or something that you're trying to overcome, he'll focus on that. Mine is, again, much more out of just curiosity and wanting to understand a past life. And so the way he'll approach my session is taking me to a past life that will help me the most in this life. So whether it's, and I have no idea what that means, and I can't wait to find out and hear about that, but something that will hopefully shed light on or bring, just bring about something I should know that'll help me in this life. And one of the things that's come up to me as a little bit of I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around it is, I guess even, okay, so say it was a trauma, right? So say I had a trauma and I wanted to release my leg pain. If I was to go another life and realize I had leg pain, or I got stabbed in the leg, why just seeing that would all of a sudden it be released in this life? What do you think about that?
I don't know that I necessarily have the answer, but I just say, so from the books, the podcasts, and everything we read, absolutely every story is that the identification of living that moment releases the pain. And I think the idea is that our soul held on to it. And when you see it and resolve that it's from a different life, you let go of it. And I think that's what's happening is, so we're talking about the soul as an energy that goes, from body to body. So what would make sense is you held on to this. I was hit in the back of the head. And so that is where my migraines are in my next soul's life. So by reliving that moment where I was hit there, I say, okay, I leave it in this life. This isn't for me to carry on to this one. And that's how I've interpreted it.
I like that. I do like
so
that.
So it's the witnessing of it, not unlike they say even in our own life. If you have therapy, you're not going to get through pain by ignoring.
You have to go through it.
You have to
go through it to let it go.
You
can't just block it and pretend it's not there.
Yeah, it's exactly the similar approach to therapy.
It really is.
It's just the woo-woo of it being a different body, but the same soul. So actually, let's put it this way. That's why past life regression providers are called therapists, because, and often have a medical license as therapists or started that way and went that direction. They're actually helping resolve something for you. It's your soul, just the one that's sitting here. You just happen to be remembering a different skin and location. So I think that's super cool. But the pain one is probably one of the coolest repeat evidence that when you start to look into the subject is in almost every story you read.
Right.
What's interesting for us and what's kind of fun, you guys, that this is what we can't wait about, is you're not actually a person going into this with pain or a trauma you want to address, or even a location that you're like obsessed with. None of these.
Right.
And I almost like the genericness of going in that way and seeing like, what are we going to find out about you?
Yeah, I'm so excited.
Like, what are we gonna? And I'll tell you on the reverse, just to like give the contrast of the two of us, I'm a person who's had a lifelong obsession with reincarnation. And obviously I've done a regression before, which I will share when we talk about your regression. We'll get into more. But what I thought was interesting is I had a million things I wanted to address, and the regression went a completely different direction.
Yes.
So what I will say at this moment is, so we just talked about my affinity for France. So I thought for sure it was going to pop up, and nothing about France popped up. And instead, I lightly landed in an ancient culture, and I'll get into what I experienced. But I had multiple things I wanted to address. But the funny thing is, the regression takes the path it will, and it has a lot to do with where the therapist guides it. So mine was a birthday present I was given, and they said, "Let's take you back to the lifetime where you had the greatest gifts or connection." And so that was the thing that popped up for me. So in any case, with you coming into it, I have this suspicion that it's an even better starting point.
I hope so.
To try to want it to be something.
Yeah.
But like, what are we going to come up with? Like, I have this like, I'll always romanticize reincarnation. I never can.
Yeah, which is fine.
So like for me, for you, I'm romanticizing that you're coming back and you and I are going to investigate a new land.
That's so funny. It's funny, like, I'm not romanticizing it. I'm feeling like it's going to be, I don't even know what it's going to be. And one of the things that I've, like he mentioned too, is one of the things that, like, people are, like, able to kind of go back to the more of, like, nothing's provable. Well, some things, I guess you can fact check. But in this, a lot of it is just like, you got to kind of believe and be open to it. And one of the things that he said was that, like, a lot of times what you think is going to happen is not at all what happens. And, like, you would never make it up. Like, you would, like, you almost can't even make it up. Like, you couldn't think, if I was to make something up for past life, it would be, like, I'm the queen of this, or I'm some really romanticized version. And I feel like that's another way that you can kind of, like, I hope, like, he mentioned, like, that's sometimes a proof point of that you couldn't make it up, because that's,
I like proof points.
Yeah, because, like, I do too. Because I think that's, like, he didn't caution at all, because he's obviously a believer and he's done thousands of these and seen people believe. But, like, that's, like, something where he said, when you're doing it, like, you'll start seeing things, and, afterwards, like, sometimes people, like, don't talk during it, and, like, he wants to help guide you, so he wants you talking. He's like, sometimes people don't talk during it, and they're like, yeah, nothing was really happening. I was seeing this, like, weird mountain, but didn't make sense. And he's like, well, that was exactly what was supposed to, so you have to kind of be aware. And one of the other things that, what I like about the way he is doing it is he's taking me back to whatever life will help the most, which I mentioned before. And so I don't know if that's going to be 50 years ago or 500 years ago, but I had, I've been thinking about that too, like, what time and space is that? And so
I love that.
I'm very excited. I'm very excited to share and to see if it works, to see, because I already feel like such a believer, but I mean, I hope I come back, I'm more of a believer,
Totally.
I think I will. But yeah, so that's our next episode. We'll dig deep into my experience, what we learned, how it went.
And I have to say, yay you for being vulnerable, because what I'm asking of you when you come back, and this is really funny, you guys, not unlike when you got me the psychic, I'm literally coming over 5 minutes after this scheduled regression ends for you.
Yeah.
And I'm coming over immediately for us to record what happened. And I'm asking you to share the thoughts that feel made up.
Yes.
And so I'm asking you guys, when you hear her story, to take it with a grain of salt, that I'm actually asking you to say the things that might be embarrassing or stupid to say, because they feel like you made them up.
Right.
So we're gonna talk like we're believers, even if you're questioning.
Yes, exactly.
And so
that's just it.
Note that it doesn't mean that she believes everything we're saying.
We're gonna
try to report as if we're, in the field. You know, if there's a rustling of the trees, we're reporting it, right?
Yes.
So I can't wait. What are we going to discover?
What are we going to learn? I want to figure out if I have like a big learning.
I can't wait. And you know what? Like, again, like I'm dramatic about it. You're more logical about it. Is it going to be subtle and light, or do I get a romantic story we get to investigate out of you?
Right.
I don't know the answer, but can't wait. And I'll see you on the flip side of learning about a past life, my friend.
All right, can't wait. Talk soon. Thank you for listening. We've loved being your spiritual travel guides and hope this made you feel more connected. Please leave a review on Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast player. Your reviews help us create the guide that you are looking for. We'd also love to hear your stories.
You could follow and share your experiences with us on Instagram at So Guided Podcast. Your story might just be our next weekly woo-woo. Join us again next week as we continue to dig deeper into the universe. And remember, stay curious, ask the questions. You are so guided.